Ask Reddit by Law of Darks 18. Overthinkers of Reddit, what unlikely scenario actually came true that you were completely prepared for because you are an overthinker? I always carry a small sewing kit whenever I go to a wedding. I have sewed 2 brides into their dresses so far. I worked weddings for a while, during an age 26-28, where lots of my friends were getting married. I've helped to bustle pretty much every bride whose wedding I attended, including brides who I didn't know well, who were either friends of my husband, or I was close friends with the groom. At work, I had one of those craft supply organizers full to the brim of emergency supplies, pins, safety, bobby, and straight pins, hair ties, earring backs, a sewing kit, pain relievers, Tums, granola bars. Sometimes you just need to get the bride to eat something. Chalk works great for covering up minor stains on white dresses. Hairspray, makeup remover wipes, super glue, band-aids, blister bandages, you name it. People were always pleasantly surprised when they needed something random and I was just like, yep, I've got that. Here you go. All the teachers at the middle school I taught at knew I was a pack rat, and one day a kid split his pants and the school counselor came to me and said, "Mr. The hog dog, would you happen to have a pair of sweats or gym pants in your truck?" Yep. So the kid spent the rest of the day in a pair of nylon pants I had behind my seat. He is lucky because if he didn't fit he would have spent the rest of the day in a white disposable coverall I had in case I had car trouble in nice clothes. Icing on the cake, it was a student I really liked who was super helpful to other kids and teachers, so it was nice to do something nice for him. I also carried a Swiss Army brand soft side briefcase, yard sale find, stuffed, and it had a few of each size of battery. One day Phil Necro and 2 Braves players were there for an assembly and Phil's mic battery was dying, so I sprinted upstairs to my classroom, grabbed a 9V from my bag, then basically rolled across the panel and switched out his battery and got back to the PA, avoiding getting on TV news cameras. Not me, but my mother. Apparently at a party where my parents and their friends were playing board games, there was a realization that an hourglass was missing from one of the games they planned on playing. My mother proceeded to reach into her purse and pull out an hourglass she just so happened to bring, on the off chance they didn't have one. However, later in the night when some drinks had been had, someone accidentally slammed a drink down, breaking my mother's hourglass. Without missing a beat, she reached into her purse and pulled out another hourglass. She knew the first one, being glass, might get broken, so she had a backup ready. Now this is dedication to game night, lol. When my son was still a baby, we had to take an 11-hour flight. As an overthinker, I brought at least 25 diapers for him to go through. He didn't need that many, but the mom sitting close to us was very grateful when she ran out of diapers not even halfway through the flight and I gave her a few. You are a savior. Me and my wife always have tons in our diaper bag. Our son is only a month old, but he's a monster and a change can sometimes involve 4-5 diapers. I found a nickel-sized lump on my 15-month-old daughter's temple, freaked out, obsessed over it, researched it exhaustively, and concluded it was a dermoid cyst that had worn through the skull. I was told by a pediatrician that it was a bone bruise that would fix itself over the course of 3 to 6 months. No imaging was needed, and I shouldn't make an appointment at the children's hospital because it would resolve on its own. I got an X-ray done anyway and the radiologist confirmed every one of my suspicions, but the pediatrician still said to wait and see because that's what you do with dermoid cysts, and it was definitely not through the skull despite what the radiologist said. Made an appointment at the hospital anyway, and the surgeon swore up and down that although it was a dermoid cyst as I'd suspected, it would not be through the skull since in all his years of practice it. Being a parent sounds so terrifying. Happy for your daughter, though nice work. I carry scissors in my glove compartment. They came in handy when a kid tightened a skinny zip tie around my 9-year-old's finger at a park. Completely cut off the circulation. Also the other kid's mom was a nurse, so that was helpful too. Carry scissors and a nurse at all times. Ah crap, I forgot to pack my nurse. One time, I overthought a concern I had around dry vent fire. When the time came that we had a clog, didn't know, and there was a wee burst of flames, I was fucking ready. Edit to at, I cleaned the lint trap religiously. I just had a gut feeling. I bought one of those things from Amazon to clean it and nothing came out, so don't let that fool you if your drying times are up and there's sometimes a smell. Call someone or check every possible location. We found basically Brillo pads of burnt hair inside the heating element. Stay safe, pals. Last edit. Thanks for the award, my first of this kind. You rock, Fuzzibum. Did you just sit next to it waiting for it to burn? I bought and learned to use a Slim Jim, open locked cars. I carry one in my car and have been able to help no less than 10 people who have locked their keys in their car. My brother was visiting me from out of town and he needs something from Target. He called me and said an elderly man had locked his keys in his car and I was able to drive over and help. Also have jumper cables that have helped start a few stranded drivers. That's really nice of you. Went through a stage as a teenager where I thought I was psychic. I know, stupid. A friend asked me jokingly to make a prediction. I told him to get a flashlight, because tomorrow would be dark. I grabbed one myself when I got home and put it in my purse. No idea why, just did it. The next day the eastern seaboard blackouts happened. He still asks for predictions to this day. Well, what's gonna happen tomorrow? I was supposed to get married at the end of May last year. At the beginning of the year, before any of the pandemic stuff happened, I became obsessed with thinking about all the things that could go wrong and how we would lose our money spent on the event. As a result, I purchased a very high coverage insurance policy for the event. As luck would have it, this type of insurance had no clause that prevented collecting if there was a pandemic. We got all of our money back. Edit. I'm also a germaphobe and so I had already stockpiled masks, gloves, Lysol wipes and hand sanitizer. As a should have been 2020 bride who opted out of wedding insurance because only an apocalypse would keep me from this wedding, I can say that was very smart of you. In college on occasion upperclassmen would randomly steal the underclassmen towels from the shower stalls and then lock their room doors so they had to go to the bar acid. I had the idea to stash a towel in the drop shielding tiles for just that event. Maybe a week later I became the victim of a towel snatching. However, the upperclassmen were very unhappy to see me strut out with a nice clean towel from my shielding stash. That sounds like less overthinking and more just being prepared for what you knew could realistically happen to you. I carry a fire extinguisher in my auto. I witnessed a car accident where the engine caught fire. I quickly put it out before it burned the inside of the car. Everyone survived. What's a car-safe fire extinguisher that can withstand being left inside in summer heat? I'm concerned the compressed gas propellant might burst. I always keep an open deck of cards in my backpack. You never can tell when some hold'em may be needed to pass the time. But when I was at a business conference, the bigwig who was presenting to us was having to wing it with a few things because his luggage had been lost, and he didn't have all of his materials. He had a PowerPoint deck, but he didn't have his props. He started going into explaining how he'd be able to demonstrate this statistical principle he was describing, only he didn't have the open deck of cards he needed. Voila! I was able to produce a shrink-wrap deck of cards. My boss was also in the same presentation, and he was also impressed that I just happened to have a deck of cards on me, so that's nice, too. Specifically in an open deck? Like, if you get stuck waiting and play a game to pass the time, you just beam the cards when finished and buy a new deck. Injuring my dominant hand. As a kid I had an irrational fear of having it chopped off. I spent all of grade 6 teaching myself to write and do things with my left hand. I made a conscious effort to remain as ambidextrous as possible. As an adult I broke a few fingers on my dominant hand, but it wasn't a big issue because I could do most things equally with my left hand. Anticlimactic, but it was useful lol. Edit. Thanks for the rewards folks. Edit 2. Spelling. Have the exact same fear and have been working on training my left hand occasionally. I'm also trying to learn to itch in case I go blind. Getting lost in a foreign country. Relying on phone GPS to navigate. Data stops working. Had over-prepared and memorized the map of the downtown area ahead of time. Deleted. I am basically blind without my glasses, and I've always taken a backup pair of glasses when I travel. It went untouched for years, taking up valuable space in my luggage. Lo and behold, one trip to Montreal a few years ago I just woke up one morning to find my glasses broken, no idea how it happened. And I finally got a chance to break out my backup pair. I use both contacts and glasses. I keep spare contacts in the glove box, my toiletry kit and a bag when traveling. Nothing sucks more than being out and losing vision. Came for the validation, did not disappoint. Will forever bring way too much stuff everywhere just in case. Edit. Wow, thanks all. Ironic, I should have been more prepared for these accolades. I have always done this since I was a kid and would often have comments made like, are you sure you're just packing for a weekend? But then no one is complaining when they need something and you're the only one who thought to bring it. I used to live out of my backpack, and I always thought I'd need to leave town, so I kept just about everything in there you could ever need. Oftentimes I'd end up having to stay somewhere without much notice, and I'd have a change of clothes, face wash, toothbrush, toothpaste, scissors, floss, phone charger, money, snacks, etc. Enough to cover me for at least 2 days without actually needing to go home. I hope you're in a better place now and able to have some security. Not me overthinking, but one time when my girlfriend and I were going to the gym she packed me 2 spare shirts. I made a joke that it wasn't necessary to bring 2 as it's not like I was gonna explosively shit myself or something and ruin the spare shirt and need a second spare. We laughed it off but brought 2 anyway. After changing from my sweat-soaked shirt to a spare upon walking home, a bird shits all down me, ruining the shirt I was wearing. I was so thankful she had brought an additional spare, so I now do not question the quantity of what she decides to bring anywhere. The death of a family member. OCD, when overthinking turns into repeatedly mourning for family who are still alive, because how would I feel if I never get to see them again? This is actually a concept that dates back to Stoicism called negative visualization. I had a feeling my entire pregnancy that my daughter would be early. She was due the 21st of July and I somehow felt like she would arrive before Father's Day. Bought my husband a pink tie to put her footprints on for his first Father's Day gift. Had my hospital bag packed and car seat installed early. Had a boy jump from a bookcase onto my belly while I was teaching pre-K, which tore an abdominal muscle, triggered early labor, and my daughter arrived the 9th of June via emergency C-section. No way I could have known, but I prepared. OMG, that's crazy. How did they repair the abdominal muscle? Also, thank God you didn't have a placental abruption from that. Mace. A person I worked with was a registered sex offender and he had a thing for me. I told him multiple times that he made me feel uncomfortable and to stay away from me. For some reason I had nightmares about this dude. He was 6.5 feet tall and fucking hideous. Anyways, he said he was going to stop at a store that I stopped at all the time after work, and it was obvious he knew my direction when I left. I pull up to this store and he's already there, walks up to my car and I just roll down my window and spray this dude, and he dropped a billy club out of his sleeve. Everyone always told me to stop being paranoid and stop thinking he's going to attack me or hate me, that he's been to jail and learned his lesson. Fuck that dude. He should have never been let out of prison. For reference, I'm also a 6 foot tall dude who is always prepared for the worst. What's a billy club? What would I do if my neighbor's house caught on fire? I said I'd make sure my kids were safe and panic, and then we'd run if the fire got close. My neighbor's house caught on fire and I sat outside and watched it with my kids and panicked. This is the most real response. We can overthink everything and lose sleep whatever, but when reality strikes you are only reacting. Now you know how you actually react in that situation and I'm sure you're now overthinking your next strategy lol. I work in childcare and was working at a center that was so draining. I started applying for new jobs and went on a couple interviews. One time, I had an interview with another daycare and was offered the position. I loved my coworkers and ultimately decided to turn the new position down. However, I had this gut feeling that I couldn't burn any bridges in case shit at my current job hit the fan. So when I turned down the new job, I made up an excuse saying I'd love to take the offer but couldn't because of this reason but would be in the touch sometime in the future. Lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, shit hit the fan at my work. I took a month off and then emailed the job that offered me a position and started 2 weeks later. I missed an interview when I had COVID. Now the company won't even look at my applications. Even after I explained the situation, they won't consider me, which I guess is fair since it is their choice. As a bartender, I bring to work sugar cubes for champagne cocktails, extra band-aids, Tylenol, an Arso wine opener for crumbling corks, duct tape, a sewing kit with extra buttons, extra staples, a Guinness spoon, silver Sharpie, extra shoelaces. I think that's all the unusual stuff. Within a month at a new job I've usually handed something to somebody in need and become a very minor legend. Edit. Oh yeah, I had a box of N95 masks in my earthquake kit, cause inhaling concrete dust while digging people out would be bad. So when the pandemic hit I donated half to frontline healthcare and kept the rest to rotate. When I had a tumor removed a couple years ago I kept the surgical blue vomit bag thing they gave me just in case, in my car in case anyone ever got sick while I'm driving. Last winter I was on a third date, driving on the highway back home with her, and she was feeling like she was going to throw up. Could not find the blue vomit bag. Felt dumb telling her where to look when it was in my center console all along. She ended up ralphing in a grocery bag that luckily didn't break. Overthought and forgot. I was on a flight back from Asia and the whole plane was Sanrio themed, so I took 2 of the cute pink bath bags that had Hello Kitty on them and put them in my car too. It's a weird thing to make so cute, but they thought of everything. I keep my gym bag in the car so I have a dry outfit after getting into a water balloon fight with my nephews. Also I carry band-aids, tissues, Benadryl and stamps, which I give out frequently. Kids skinned their knee at the zoo? Got a bee sting? Runny nose? Forget to mail the kids FAFSA or your tax return? I got you. Are spontaneous water balloon fights that much of a concern? If so, awesome. COVID. I worked at a medical uniform and supply store years ago, and they were moving locations. They decided they weren't gonna sell face masks anymore, and were gonna throw boxes of them away. I asked if I could keep them. Just in case. They've been moving with me for about 5 years before I actually use the masks. As soon as the news stories started coming out about a new virus, I started adding a few extra things to my grocery shop each week. I picked up extra craft supplies for my then 2-year-old, bought extra nappies for the baby I was expecting in January. I even told my family not to bother booking flights to come see the new baby because there was going to be a pandemic and it wouldn't be safe to travel. They told me it was just the pregnancy hormones and I was massively overreacting. Someone broke into my house while I was in the shower finally, so I screamed fuck yeah, I get to use my shower gun. All I did really was charge the dude naked while holding a Glock, but the sheer look of terror on his face was priceless. My best friend used to live off the access road of a very busy highway in North Texas, South I-35. One night, his dad was doing something in the backyard when he saw 2 strange men hop over the gate to their driveway and start walking around the house. Normally, he would have been armed but not at that moment. He knew the men couldn't see his location and decided to yell shoot those fuckers in the head as loud and crazy as he could manage. Similar actions and they rushed back over the gate and back from where they came from. Great thinking on his toes and I will never forget it. Made my kids rehearse for a fire. We had rope ladders, escape routes and a meeting spot everyone should the 17th of January 18 we put it all to the test. I thank God every day that we all made it out because we were prepared. Overthinking and anxiety for the win. Deleted. So maybe not quite this, but my little sister. Through a long series of events, my parents, who were not foster parents and not looking to adopt, ended up taking care of an infant, who was not at all related to us, whose mother had just died. It was only supposed to be for a few weeks until she could be moved to a more permanent placement. As soon as I found out that my parents had agreed to help watch her temporarily, I knew where this was going, and I had all the initial adoption application paperwork printed out before she ever got to our house. Needless to say, my parents were pretty surprised the day they said they were thinking of adopting her, and I handed them a folder of forms and my handwritten notes on how the process worked. For the record, she has legally been my little sister for 7 years now. As a parent, I am sure your parents were touched not only by your preparation but by the way the gesture indicated total acceptance and support for your sister becoming your sister. I carry some of just about everything in my purse. We were at a beach during off season and a kid wiped out. I had everything needed to clean and bandage him up. I carried that stuff, renewing when it got old, for almost 20 years before actually needing it. Thanks for the awards. I have a similar experience. I have just about everything you could possibly need to survive in the car if it breaks down or something else happens. I was driving and an old couple was crossing a driveway headed home after a nice lunch out. The lady biffed it on the curb. She had ripped quite a bit of her skin and was bleeding all over the place. I saw them, pulled my car over and was able to hop out, clean her up, and bandage everything up. It felt really good to be prepared and help the frantic old couple. I'm starting to think that my whole life becomes this scenario. I think so much about how my life could go that I'm kinda drawn to fulfill these scenarios. But it's not like I imagine myself becoming a millionaire or something, more down to earth stuff. Being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease after researching it thoroughly and knowing I had it, but everyone in my family telling me I was just being a hypochondriac. Was prepared for the diagnosis, not so much the life with it, but it's getting easier. Riding a motorcycle. I always assume every car around me is going to wildly pull out in front of me or swerve into my lane multiple times. These assumptions have saved my life. I'm a pretty crazy overthinker and a lot of times it's needless worry, but I feel like sometimes it prepares me for something that does actually happen. The first thing they taught me when I was learning how to drive was, drive like everyone around you is an idiot that has no idea how to drive. Honestly, sometimes that doesn't feel far off from the truth. My partner tells me I overthink and overbuy groceries because I have an intense fear of not being able to provide for my daughter. When COVID hit and the shops were out of stock of everything, guess who was the one supplying food and toilet paper to said partner? Same. I told him he never gets to criticize the fact that we always have backups of cleaning and paper products, as well as a well-stocked pantry ever again. I was in dorms my first year in uni and people always thought it was funny that I locked my door at night. We were all pretty close and I was insinuating people were thieves and trustworthy. One night I heard someone fiddle with my door and I peeked through the peephole and saw someone I did not recognize. Turned out he got drunk in the nearby bar, managed to sneak into the building, and tried to sneak into multiple other girls' rooms. Our names and pronouns were listed on the door. Who doesn't lock their door at night? A couple years ago, I was taking classes at this tuition academy when I stepped out for a cigarette. Back then, my family didn't know I smoked, so I was slightly apprehensive. There was a shop nearby, and I just took a quick look at some cars parked nearby. I even internally chided myself for being so paranoid. Imagine my surprise when I saw my mom's car. I then saw my mom with my younger brother at a shop nearby, buying some stuff. To my knowledge, that was the only time she ever visited that particular shop, and it was at the exact moment when I decided to smoke a cig. My anxiety bailed me out for once, although my mom did find out about the smoking later. Deleted. That is really smart, even taking the tipping into consideration. When I was a camp counselor, I carried a makeshift first aid kit with me everywhere, which isn't really over-preparedness, but I supplemented it with tampons, pads, hard candy, and a small pair of shorts. I had my job for 3 summers and needed all my auditions exactly once, all in the same summer. I'd actually like to encourage everyone who hikes or does outdoorsy stuff to carry the first 2 especially. Lots of people confusing overthinking with over-preparing. I'm just a planner : goes back to anxiously making lists. I'm the one dude in any scenario that has tampons on hand. I've been that dude since my middle school girlfriend recommended it. It only happens once a year, but I get a huge kick out of the look on people's faces when I get to offer one up. Fellas, if you're dating someone with a vagu, just keep a few. They don't take up much space and you'll be ready to help at a moment's notice. My school went into lockdown because of a potential active shooter. I've thought about that scenario 1,000 times in my head, so when it actually happened and we went into lockdown, I barricaded the doors just how I imagined 1,000 times. I'm sure this'll probably get lost, but one day I get a text while I'm in my last class of the day for high school that my mom isn't home as she took my dog to the vet, and I wasn't aware of any appointments that were made for my dog. So on the way home, I kept going through worst case scenarios in my head, and the one I got stuck on was that she was about to be put down and they were waiting until I could see her. Well, turns out, that is actually what happened, and not a day goes by where I don't think about her. When the towers came down, I was working at a company that markets builders. We saw a drastic decrease in new homes across the country. Combined with a lowering interest rate, I expected a huge financial crisis. We moved from Michigan to Nebraska because corn and beef will always be in demand. Everyone laughed at us. The housing bubble hit Michigan starting in about 2006 or 7. By 2008 it was a depression. Michigan saw record unemployment. Nebraska's was the second best in the country. Edit. Fixed spelling. OHH. The towers. I usually speak autocorrect, but I was struggling with this one. My company was in shambles financially and was laying off, bit before Corona. I kinda sensed my number will come soon, so I applied for master's degree. I got laid off and 2 weeks later I had my acceptance letter for a master's degree. Saved me the panic of finding a job in a post-Corona economy in 2020. I keep a change of clothes in my car at all times and a wool blanket in case my car breaks down or I'm stuck in undrivable conditions. Sure enough, about 11 years ago it snowed just heavily enough that my pavement princess of a car couldn't drive safely in it and I was too far away from town to turn back, so I pulled over and waited out the snow in comfort. I had snacks and water remaining from the trip I was still on at the time, until the street sweepers came through. I built a first aid kit once in which I tried to imagine every wilderness emergency scenario. I was a wilderness whitewater guide. A client going into a diabetic episode asked me, "You wouldn't happen to have any sugar packs, would you?" I replied, "As a matter of fact, I do." She was so relieved and thankful that my planning included persons with her infliction. I got pregnant. I thought I couldn't be so lucky. Surely I will miscarry. Nope, didn't miscarry, but I had a weird feeling all pregnancy my baby will die. Despite good scans, good heartbeat. Overthinking persisted. 35 weeks pregnant, feeling tired and swollen, I felt a need to have the baby checked. Overthinking this all day. I finally went in labor and delivery. Scanned me, said my baby was in heart failure and didn't even have a brain. He did have a brain, it was just so swollen with fluid it was undetectable. I was taken by ambulance to a better hospital, diagnosed with vein of Galen malformation. 1 in a million odds and I won. My baby lived for 5 days. My worst case did come true. I'm so sorry this happened to you. I hope you're doing well now. Co-signer on car loan wasn't making payments and wouldn't return car. Fled. I logged into the online tracking and had the car towed. Overthought, dude, if I leave it on the street she's going to steal it back. And she tried. Left her phone under the mat. Tracked it. Showed up to where I had garaged the car at a buddy's off the street. Impressive and entitled that one is. Yikes. Thank for the reminder to never co-sign a car loan.